Hey y'all, I'm the captain, and this is Sailing on the Spectrum, where I talk about the challenges growing up with autism spectrum disorder. Welcome aboard. Today, I'm talking about the issue of food on the spectrum, and especially as it pertains to picky eating. Plenty of children on the spectrum can be particularly picky eaters. Now, kids in general can be picky eaters, at least a good portion of them, I guess, to one extent or another. But with those on the spectrum, it definitely is another one of those heightened challenges. It certainly, I would say it was for me growing up, but I want to kind of be sure I kind of set the record straight on how the issue really affects those on the spectrum, in the sense that it's not always, just a nightmare trying to get your kid to eat, if your kid's on the spectrum or something like that. For me, I definitely had picky eating issues, but it wasn't like my parents couldn't feed me and that I would eat nothing but junk all the time. Um, and but definitely have some memories of how things were back then, foods that I would just not want to eat, or that I was just extremely sensitive to. I mean, I would say that one of the things about people on the spectrum, and certainly children on the spectrum, is the fact that there's definitely a heightened sensitivity to certain stimuli. And that isn't just like, things like sounds and things like, um, touch and other things like that. I have another video on that about sound sensitivity, and but in the realm of taste, that definitely is true as well. I would say, in particular, I was very sensitive to certain textures and certain smells. Those are definitely things that just can create, if you're not, even if you're a kid on the spectrum and you're not sure of what you're getting into, you can react very adversely. It doesn't mean you necessarily throw a tantrum when all the time. I'm sure there were times where I was really not happy about something maybe my parents just wanted me to try, or something that my mom had cooked for dinner that I just was bummed about because I knew I wasn't gonna like it. But there were probably times when I wasn't happy, but I don't know if I necessarily flailed and went crazy or anything like that. If you think that every kid on the spectrum does that about every single thing that bothers them, that's certainly a unfair characterization. But yeah, with me, I'm sure I had a lot of things about food that were real hang-ups, about a lot of certain foods. But I don't know. It's just I know it's. I remember not liking certain kinds of vegetables, and I guess to this day, I still don't particularly like some of those vegetables. Doesn't mean I can't eat them. There may be a few others that I wouldn't have liked back then at all that I probably am okay with now. Like things like, I know I didn't like spinach, or at least I didn't like canned spinach, boiled spinach. I still not a big fan. Not that I couldn't eat it if I had to, but back then I couldn't at all. I didn't like lima beans. I didn't like broccoli, and I guess maybe there are other kids that maybe aren't on the spectrum who don't like those vegetables. I'm not a fan of cauliflower. I certainly wasn't then either, but I remember just having to try it, just a little bite, and it could be a real standoff sometimes if I just had to sit there and just wait to eat it and just hope that I didn't, just spit it up. And, but it was, I would sometimes, yeah, get into where I just want a lot of the same foods. I guess maybe it was always, um, I did like chicken nuggets. I probably didn't exclusively like chicken nuggets like some kids might like. And then, it's just kind of a thing with kids. It just seems to be one of those things that kids just seem to instantly want, and it seems to be really popular. And I definitely liked them, but then I only liked white bread. I remember not liking bread that had any, that wheat germ or other things that were on the crust. Sometimes I wouldn't even want the crust on the bread. It's just those little specific things. I remember also not wanting my food to touch, whenever I ate, and I would never, um, I would only eat, if there were different things on my plate, I would want to finish one thing before I moved to the next. It's something that I just kind of very uh, uh, customarily did. And I mean, I don't think that only people on the spectrum do that. I don't think that shouldn't be considered an OCD thing. I'm not saying that there are those on the who have OCD who are prone to those types of peculiar habits, let's say, if they're eating but usually they are even more specific and more, I don't know how to say it, rigid in ways that, even I could never have imagined being, at least that I can recall. I didn't like count how many times I chewed or anything. I don't really, I haven't really dived into the obsessive compulsive disorder world to really know and to be able to, speak freely about how they all are, because so I don't want to sound like I'm speaking above my knowledge with that. But with me, I know there was definitely certain little peculiarities that I probably just stuck to as I grew up. And I remember when I'd order a hamburger, I'd only want ketchup on it. I remember, funny thing though, you talk about how you can, I know over time I've kind of grown, and like a lot of other things about me and my certain facets of my personal makeup, there are things about me that just kind of develop over time, and then things I just kind of, for lack of a better term, I just grow out of. I don't, uh, you know, maybe I'm not as excessively sensitive to certain things as much as I would have been when I was much younger. And I guess with food, that's kind of in the case as well. And I would say overall, a lot of those things are things that just kind of developed only a little bit later, maybe for me. A lot of the social um, uh, aptitudes and and being able to communicate better. Those are things that I kind of, just came to do better and more naturally later in life. And I guess maybe with food, I began to accept a wider variety of foods later in life that whereas others, tend to kind of get in that groove maybe a little bit sooner, and they get to where maybe they're still, maybe even when they're still kind of a young kid, they can still eat just about anything. But most seems like by adulthood, they could eat most things. And I guess with me, there were a fair amount of things that I could eat more easily, a variety of things, and be all good with it. Whereas even over time, I became more able to eat different kinds of things, not just simpler foods. Like, a lot of times, I would say even into early adulthood, I would stick to foods that were generally a lot simpler, at least, um, but I remember if you talk about if simple foods like plain hamburgers with just ketchup, I remember one time, and I specifically remember I was probably after my eighth grade year, and I was about 14 going on 15, and I remember staying with my grandparents in Florida, and one day I think my granddad took me out to Wendy's, and we I got a burger, and I think I had ordered, per usual, ordered ketchup only, and it had, I think, lettuce on it, and I didn't realize it until I started eating it. But then I was like, I kind of liked it, and then I think from then on, I kind of just preferred to have lettuce along with it. And it's funny because sometimes, I don't know, it's just, I think at some point I ended up just wanting I ended up wanting cheeseburgers. I almost never wanted a cheeseburger when I was growing up, but I guess at some point, maybe when I was in my teens, I would like cheeseburgers, but I would only want cheese on them. And sometimes depending on where I get my burger, I still want that. I remember this steakhouse that was one of those family steakhouses where you could order and um, you get. It was kind of one of the, I don't know how to describe it. It was called Ryan's, and it's gone by other names in other places, but it was where you could have get pretty good steak meal for fairly cheap. And I remember always ordering sirloin tips, medium, with fries. I didn't want onions or anything on them. I certainly didn't want mushrooms. That's another one. I still am not a fan of mushrooms, uh, and I never was then. But yeah, I remember. I think really, you're talking about my parents and the way they reared me, they definitely uh, were good with, I guess, just getting me to try certain things, but they never had, I don't think they ever had titanic fights with me about trying to get me to eat something that, that I needed to try or that they wanted me to try. They'd get me to try it, but then, I don't think they really worried a great deal about what kinds of foods I was getting. And in the end, I ended up just coming to like other foods, in time, even if it didn't happen as soon as maybe some others would have been, and so, and lo and behold, I'm able to eat all kinds of things that I never would have dreamed would have liked back then. Doesn't mean that there aren't things I still might not like, but there were times where I remember loving Kraft macaroni and cheese, box macaroni and cheese. And the thing to understand is, even if you got a generic, like, store brand of that, I still probably would not want that. I'd want Kraft brand macaroni and cheese, and I would be able to tell if there was a difference. It's like those acute, sensitive taste buds, and there's something about it. Certainly with people on the spectrum that can be, and some other kids too. Um, but my parents certainly were happy to accommodate in a lot of those ways. They were, I guess it was one of those things they kind of, thought was neat and made me who I was. And I certainly can appreciate them for that. But if you are a parent raising somebody on the spectrum who's got really peculiar and picky and hard to figure out eating habits or aversions, don't, I would say that there's a lot of, uh, understandably, the worry that, your kid's not going to have the balanced, good nutrition that they probably need, or that they're going to starve. You probably shouldn't worry about that. And I probably would not feel like you have to. I would say in general, you need to pick your battles. You don't need to fight over and just squabble over every little food you wish they would eat. And like, why don't you eat this? I love this. This is good for me. I mean, you're not going to convince any kid to eat something, either on the spectrum or otherwise. I don't think if you just lay that argument, it's not like, yeah, they're going to be like, yeah, you like it, but I don't. I mean, but don't think that they're going to grow up just eating junk food all the time and get high cholesterol when they're in their 20s, and you know have heart disease when they're in their 30s. That's not uh, something that's destined for them to happen for them just because they have sensitive habits at a young age. They're not doomed to be early obese or develop diabetes. Um, in time, I really believe there is a way, I don't know how it is, that there will develop and just come to accept other types of food in their time, uh, you know, and you probably don't have as much to worry about as some would have you believe. In general, I would say that's the case. I mean, it's crazy. I never would have thought I'd end up eating Indian cuisine. Is it, you know, I do remember even as a younger guy kind of liking some things that were spicy, but I never tried all of them. Uh, I've always, and I guess maybe the spiciest thing I'd had, I live in South Carolina, and we have barbecue here, and definitely a good, some spicy shredded barbecue with the right kind of sauce. It could be vinegar or mustard sauce, and I remember liking that. But then a dear college professor who just passed away over the weekend, actually, but he actually turned me on to eating some Indian cuisine. And the first thing I remember having with him was masala dosa at an Indian restaurant, and I actually really liked it. And that was when I was uh, either in college or probably even after college. Uh, but um, but since I got married, my wife, who's really a great cosmopolitan person who loves a lot of different cultured things in terms of literature and otherwise, and just art in general and cuisine, she did make me one thing that I got to show off. This Korean pan-fried tofu. It's spicy, and she did a great job with it. I do plenty of cooking in the house, but this was one night she did, and it just goes to show you, uh, it's possible if you're on the spectrum to be in a house with someone and be married, and then actually be able to enjoy some of the same foods, and a lot of the same foods even. So take courage. This is one, the food thing is one that I think is all right, is not that hard to tackle compared to maybe some other issues on the spectrum. You may be thinking that it's doom and gloom, but this is one that'll work itself out in time. And you could say that about a lot of other things, about people on the spectrum. So, yeah, thanks for joining, and it's good to be back doing these videos again. And stay tuned, there'll be more coming soon. All right, see you next time on Sailing on the Spectrum. Bye. One more thing, if you haven't checked it out already, go check out my blog. I'll have the link for it in the description below. I'm hoping, as I film this, to get another entry in soon, but I have what I have up already. Feel free to go check out. I'll have it in the description. All right, see you later.